Like I said, we're doing a new series this month. We're calling it Capital Plus, kind of a spin on Disney Plus, streaming, all that kind of stuff. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk through and pull some truths out from some of our favorite like retro TV shows. Some of it made the Disney Plus cut, some of it did not. Just curious, what's your guys' like go-to Disney Plus show right now? Like what? Just Santa Claus. Christmas movies for the hit. Aladdin the movie came out. The real life movie came out. Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. High School Musical the series. Oh man. Have any of you like ventured off into like your parents' TV shows? Boy Meets World. That's what I'm talking about. That's my guy, Corey Matthews. Tailspin, DuckTales. Yo, they got like the Mighty Ducks movie series. Guys, there was a kids movie that produced an NHL hockey team. That's how good the Mighty Ducks is. You have to watch that. Emilio Estevez as a hockey coach. Doesn't get any better. Goldberg the goalie. All kinds of golden stuff. So tonight we're going to kick things off with The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. How many of you guys have watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? You guys are like well-versed in this. You guys already know what's going on with this. So like you guys know how it goes. Like I was thinking about this the other night, okay? I recently, like my go-to show, like I'll venture off and try new stuff, and I'll watch, like, I'm a big documentary nerd. I'm super grateful for ESPN Plus because now I got all the 30 for 30s. But there's always, like, a few default shows that are like, oh, there's nothing on. I'll just go back to this. For me, it's The Office. I think I've watched that, like, 118 times. I just got through the end of it again. Man, gets me right here every time. Here's what I realized, though. So after that, my Office binge ended again for the umpteenth time, and I was running out of shows to go back to. So now I'm on another one that you guys would probably like all hate and think is just the dumbest show ever, but it speaks to me. It speaks to me. I watched a show called Psych. It's about a psychic detective who pretends to be a psychic to solve crimes. And they make all these, it's in like Scooby-Doo style, and they make all these obscure 90s references that if you grew up in the 90s, you're just like, that line was awesome and no one else gets it. But here's what I realized, okay? I've learned shortcuts on streaming, right? Like when you're watching on a laptop, like you hit F and it goes full screen, right? Like when the intro comes on, what do? Skip intro as fast as possible. We are depriving a generation of the best part of television. It's the intros to the TV shows, right? Like, it's not a good show. Like, you can't truly love a TV show if you can't sing the intro, okay? And so I'm gonna help save a generation tonight, and we're gonna sing the Fresh Prince theme song, okay? So if you know it and you want the world to know it and you want to show it, you can feel free to stand up to your feet, rap along to it. It's the TV version, so it doesn't have the second and third verses. But without further ado, hit the Fresh Prince theme song. Mumble rap can't do that. Come on. That's talent right there. That's talent right there. Come on. Colors that are nonsensical, baggy pants. See, we didn't have everything on a device, but we still had everything on us. That just meant we had to have the Discman in one pocket, your big old chain wallet in the other pocket. We actually carried this thing back in the day called cash, and so we had that. You had your pager on you. You had quarters so that when someone left a voicemail on your pager, you could go to a payphone, call them back. It was fancy back then. It was fancy. So, for the rest of you guys that we just alienated, my apologies. Let me catch everyone up to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You heard Will Smith's story. Kid broken home, gets in some trouble, sends him across the country, goes to Bel-Air. I nerded out on this, getting ready for this. There was a guy that sat down and did the math on how much money Uncle Phil would be worth in today's monetary system. He was a was a lawyer and then became a judge. His wife was a college professor, the first one. The second identical Aunt Viv was like a stay-at-home mom, and they just like changed the storyline, didn't tell anyone. They just changed the actress in like season 4 and didn't like just pretend like nothing happened. And then they had another kid and all this kind of stuff. So, needless to say, Uncle Phil, well, first off, R.I.P. Uncle Phil. He was balling. He was loaded, super duper 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 rich. And so we're going to kind of pull out some of the truths from this. We're going to watch a few of the video clips. Man, Will Smith at his finest. This was like, man, bringing back memories for me. So, what I want to talk a little bit about tonight, what I kind of want to start things off with, is just talking about environments, okay? Talking about environments, because I think it's the new year. How many of you guys already set your resolutions? Like, you're feeling all motivated. Like, no hands go up, right? Like, very few hands go up, because, what is it, January the 8th? And how many guys have already given up on your New Year's resolution? Your New Year's you now have February resolutions that you're gonna break, and then you'll have March resolutions that you're gonna break, all that kind of stuff. Here's kind of my thoughts when it comes to resolutions. I think they're great. I think they're good. I think goals are awesome. I have a few goals as well. Oh, before I forget, I want to give you guys a goal of mine, of many of the staff members, many of the leaders that I want to invite you guys to. If you're here on Sunday, Pastor Dennis talked about it, but a bunch of us are actually trying to read through the entire Bible this year, cover to cover. And so on the YouVersion app, if you don't have a Bible on your phone or tablet or smart device, download YouVersion. There's reading plans that you can go through and go along with each other. It's really cool. What's really interesting about this Bible plan is we're doing one that's put on by an organization called the Bible Project. The Bible Project, if you guys have never checked them out on YouTube, they're awesome. They make these really cool illustrations kind of explaining the Bible. So if you've ever tried to read the Bible, especially the Old Testament, and like everyone's related and dudes are murdering each other and they're killing animals, you're not sure why, and then they say something and you're like, did that just say what I think it said? And you're like, oh wow, it really did say what it just said, and I don't know why it said what it just said, because that's really gross, all that kind of stuff. The Bible Project puts together these like 5 to 10 minute like illustration clips that make all of it make sense and explain where Jesus, it can be seen all throughout the Bible, even though he doesn't like actually show up by name until the New Testament. And so what's cool about it is a lot of our leaders and pastors are putting in like the notes in the talk it over section, so you can see how we're processing the Bible. And so you can jump in with that. We're only on day 8, and so you guys can catch up with that. But the other thought with resolutions and goals is this. I've just realized this, and I don't know if you guys have seen this to be true as well, but like a lot of times I don't have a ton of control about my entire world. It's like all my goals are about what I can do to affect myself and the world around me, but then life happens and I'm in this perpetual state of like reacting to what the world is throwing at me. You know what I'm talking about? One of my favorite coaches, Lou Holtz, said a quote who got it from another guy, I just realized, who said it before him, who probably stole it from someone who said it before him. And so I say it like this, is that life is truly 10% of what happens, and the other 90% is how you respond to what happened. And so, in other words, saying we don't get to choose a lot about life. Like we didn't get to choose where we were born or what family we were born into, or a lot of us didn't get to choose the school we went to, or some of the things that have happened to us, or some of the things that happen around us, or some of the moments where there's been like loss of innocent moments where we saw something, or we heard something, or we heard a joke or a sense of humor that was ungodly for the first time, or we saw something we shouldn't have seen for the very first time, or maybe our parents let us down for the first time, or someone that we really looked up to let us down for the first time. There's all these moments that we can't control. But all we control is how we can respond to those moments. And so I think Fresh Prince is obviously a really good example of that, because you have it on both sides. You have Will's life growing up in west side of Philly, and then you have like Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv and the kiddos and kind of their side of things. And so we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit tonight. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to I want to hear from some of you guys tonight. And so what I love about the Capitol is, if you haven't noticed this already, we don't all look alike, we don't all act alike, we don't all have the same backgrounds, we're not all the same race, the same socioeconomical status, and that's what makes us beautiful. That's what I love about us. And what I love is I could just open mic it and just get to know stories, and you would just have amazing story after amazing story after amazing story of victory and triumph and things that we've overcome. And so I want to highlight two individuals' stories. I see one, but oh, there we go. We got both of them. Okay, so why don't you guys go ahead and make your way towards the front and come up on stage. And we're going to hear from some of our Capitol's very own. So make some noise as they make their way towards the stage. Gonna do a little sit-down interview style. Thank you. Go ahead and grab a mic, grab a seat. It's gonna be good, man. I like it. If you've never, by the way, if you've never sat in these chairs, I feel like I get at least 2.5% cooler when I sit in these chairs, because they're just like naturally lounged. You know what I'm talking? Look at, like, see, you guys are like, yeah, it's like loungy. So for the people that don't know you, why don't you tell us your name and what grade you're in?
Okay, my name is Kiari, and I'm a senior. I'm a senior at Cherokee Bluff.
My name is Caden. I'm in 10th grade.
Cool. Awesome. All right, so we already had a conversation, and so we're just like doing a second take on the conversation we had earlier. But we're going to have it in front of you guys, because these two incredible individuals have a pretty cool story that, yeah, I think is going to really speak to us. And so why don't you start, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us like your family dynamic, and the kind of the unique part that we're going to talk about tonight.
Okay, so my family, we've always fostered, like since I was 4 or 5, I've always had a foster sibling in the house. Caden came in when he was 7 and I was 9. And usually they stay for about a year is what happens. And then they will go off and they'll develop and they'll do better, and then they'll be able to leave. And that usually takes about a year. That's how long the program would last. And then they would go off and go do their own thing. But with Caden, he lived with us for a year. He was my only foster brother that I had. And he ended up coming back when you were 13 and I was 15. He was 13, I was 15. But we kept in contact. I keep in contact with all my siblings that I had. And he ended up coming back 2 years ago. And that's just kind of like how we got to right here, right now. That's how we came back to right here.
For sure. So, Caden, why don't you catch us up? Before that, just kind of tell us like where you're from and kind of like your environment. Like we were talking about like environment stories. Like what was your environment when you were little?
It wasn't the best, but I got through it.
Yeah. So you were with your mom, right, and your grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were saying earlier you were talking about your grandpa. What kind of happened?
He was like closest to me, and he died, and that kind of started like some of the behavior issues and stuff.
Yeah. So then kind of from there you were saying when all that happened, and I think anyone that's experienced loss can relate to that, of just like, man, like it changes your whole world. It changes your whole mindset. It just throws this like haze over your eyes, and it can cause a lot of confusion. It can cause some choices that we never thought we'd make, and it can change our entire world in a moment. And so from there, you were kind of in and out of some different facilities, right? And then how old were you when you came into this family?
I was 6, just turning 7.
Right. So that's like, so talk to me a little bit about that. What was that first, like you're 6, you're 7, like you're young. Like what was that like at first? Like what were you picking up on? What were you not picking up on? Just what was that like coming out of your home and into a new family, a new home, a new bedroom, all that stuff?
I mean, I didn't really understand it at first, but when I did, I kind of spazzed. Like, you know, I kind of got out of control.
Kiari, what was I guess kind of the thought process that was kind of going through my head was just like, what was that like? I guess what is it like? You know, that you have your family dynamic, but you always also have this like other room that's like your family's always expanding. Like what has that been like for you just growing up with, like you said, like pretty much your whole life having like foster siblings?
Okay, so always growing up with foster siblings, originally I was an only child for 9 years, like biologically, before my sister was born. But always having a foster sibling never gave me that only child mentality that every only child has. Everyone, all of you, you know who you are.
Only child, myself included. We're selfish people, okay?
But it developed in me early to like always have to share, because usually they were older than me. He was the first sibling that I had that was younger than me. And he was the first sibling that I had that was younger than me. So he, not only being my first male like brother, he was also the first one that was younger than me. So his dynamic and our dynamic was different from what I had experienced before. Because usually it was just kind of, we separated and did our own things. Like we would hang out as siblings, but with him, he was also the closest in age with me, even though I was older. So we would always mess around and hang out and play. Like I was like a wild child, so we would like wrestle. Like he would wrestle my stuffed animals when we were kids. Like I had these huge bunnies and things, and he would wrestle them as kids. Yeah.
You should. They're both being like very calm, cool, and collected on stage. Like they were talking so much trash earlier of like who was beating up who. I'm not gonna say what the results were, but you know, fought like siblings. So, Kate, so you were kind of alluding to that. You said like at first like kind of, you know, as your whole world changes, like stuff happens on the inside, and we, especially when we're young, like we don't always know how to process it. We don't always have like a proper outlet. And so you said yours was like you would just kind of get angry a lot, like you would just kind of get filled with rage. And so what was like just like the like dumb, in hindsight, just like the dumbest thing you did like when you were angry at their house? You said it earlier. I
ripped the door off the closet.
Like, okay, if that's not your issue, like I know I can totally relate to that. Has anyone ever done like something just dumb when you're super mad?
I had another foster sibling put a hole through a wall.
Put a hole through the wall. I was gonna say, but see, at least a hole through the wall means you somewhat won that fight. When I was in high school, I lost a wrestling match that I was supposed to definitely win, and I went backstage, went in the locker room, threw my stuff, and like punched what I thought was like just a locker, but it was the end of the lockers, and so it was just like locker facade over concrete, and so I lost that fight. Super duper bad. It was a big mistake. But anyway.
Against the wall too?
Yeah. So it was kind of rough. So, Caden, I guess another question that I would have for you, like just what was, so you've been at their home like 2 different times, right? And so you mentioned earlier, do you want to kind of give the timeline of like the other places that you've lived out? This is the only foster home you've lived in, right? Do you want to kind of share the other part of that?
In and out of facilities and stuff, you know. I actually been in 4 different facilities, like all different facilities, like Asheville, Greenville, South Carolina, you know, all different places, and you know.
And so what's kind of like the dynamics that's different from like being in a home versus being in like a facility?
I got people that, you know, care about me more when I'm at home. Like in a facility, like no one cares, like you're all alone.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that can be tough. Like, yeah, I can imagine that'd be really tough. If you kind of looking back at all of it, you know, like you could go back to your 6-year-old, 7-year-old self. Like if you could do this season all over again, kind of be in that environment all over again, like what would you go back and tell your 6-year-old self?
Don't do it. It's not worth it.
As far as what?
You know, doing dumb stuff, getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Getting so angry.
Yeah, that's good. That makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, and Carrie, to what would you say, kind of just if you could give everyone else like a glimpse into your world, like what advice would you give? What would you tell your younger self of like just what it's like always having that open heart towards like extended family?
Okay, so like 2 or 3 things. One is that looking at me and Caden, like we tell people that we're siblings, and they're just like, "Oh, really? What?" But you look at us and you can tell like it could just be that we have just a different dad, or we just have a different mom or something like that. But we tell people that he's adopted because he wasn't through a system this time. It wasn't through a company this time when he came to live with us. But we just tell him that he's adopted. But looking at us, we could pass for actual biological siblings if we wanted to. But whenever you're looking at someone, you don't actually know what's going on. You just have to know and understand that like not everything is what it seems. Like it's not everything is always okay, or not everything is always good with someone. And some people just sometimes you just need to learn and understand that like some people just need a helping hand or something like that. Like it's just not always okay. That's what I mean. And then another thing is that how you said like life is 10% of what you can't control, or like, and the other 90% is how you react to it. There was a period of time when things were not going as well, and there were like a period of time of like 3 weeks when I straight up ignored him. Like I gave him the silent treatment because there were some things going down, and I didn't like how they were going down. Like I didn't like the way either my parents or like he was handling things. And so I kind of like just got angry and I took it out on him, and I ignored him for a good 3 weeks. And looking back on it now, I kind of wish that I wouldn't have done it, because I could, instead of ignoring him and getting upset, I could have been helping him through it that whole time. So, and you gotta think about the things that you do and how they affect other people, or how it could be spent in a more positive way. And then the third thing is, always having been in foster care, it helped me, give me a perspective of like, wow, my life is so great and it could be so much worse. Like not everyone's life in here is gonna be amazing or great, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just like, some people have it really good and they don't realize how good they have it until they see the darker side of how it can be. And growing up with foster siblings, I experienced it secondhand so that I wouldn't have to put myself in that situation. And so that's another thing that I learned from.
I think that's awesome. I think you gained probably a lot of outside perspective that a lot of kids didn't really have growing up. I think a lot of us, like, we accept whatever we're raised up in. We tend to embrace our environments. Like, you've heard my story. Like my father was an alcoholic. Like he was an angry guy. Like he did a lot of bad things, but I didn't recognize that growing up because he was just dad. Like I didn't know what dysfunction was or what that looked like. And so I think the reality is, for a lot of us, like, there's always a story behind the story, and there's always more than what you're projecting to the outside. And I think it's important for us. I think we all know that about ourselves, but we still tend to judge people by the cover of the book, and we don't take the time to read the story and get to know that story and see the beauty in everyone around us. And so I think that's awesome.
There's some people, I'm like in school, like there'll be kids that like sit there and complain about something, and I'm sitting here like, really? Like, that's the hill you're gonna die on? Like, you're gonna complain about that when they could be so much worse?
Right. Talking about what they did or didn't get for Christmas, and it's
Oh
all
my
like
God.
petty stuff, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, Caden, I think another question I wanted to ask you was just like, you know, because obviously, like, if you're picking up the parallels, obviously we're talking about like the Capitol, and how like we're always wanting to open up family, and we're always wanting to show love to everyone. And so, I'm just curious, like, had it not been, because you mentioned like you've been in different types of environments, but if it weren't for their family, like, where do you think you'd be? Or like, what difference would that be without that family in your life opening their home to you?
I probably would be dead or in jail.
Wow. Just bottom line. I mean, it's crazy to think about like the small acts of kindness, like, of other people that can make like such a profound difference. But man, I'm grateful for you guys. Like, it's been fun. Like, I've loved getting to know your guys' story, hearing your guys' story a little bit more and more, and getting to know you guys. And what, like I said earlier, like we could go one by one and just hear every single person's story, and that's what makes us so incredible. So thank you guys so much for sharing your story with us. Why don't you guys make some noise for them? I'll let you guys get back to your seat. Good job. Oh, come on, one more time. Make some noise for them. That's a big deal right there. You guys did awesome. And so, just hearing their story, and obviously, like, what we always want to be about, we always want to have that, like, fostering spirit about us, that we always want to have that we always have a spare bedroom, like, mentality, that there's always room for someone to sit by us, always room for someone for us to be kind to, always someone that needs us, whether they're broken or just having a bad day. Like, it doesn't matter if it was just like just a small bump in the road, or if like their life is a wreck. Like, as Christians, that should be our greatest opportunity to show Jesus to a hurting world around us, is just to show simple acts of kindness. And so, not to say that all of us are going to go off someday and be foster parents or foster siblings and open up our home on a level like that, but my prayer is that all of us at least have a fostering heart. Like, we have an adoptive heart, that there's always room to let the family grow and expand. And so I think that's awesome. And so obviously in the Fresh Prince story, there's a lot of that. Like, as I was thinking through that, like, there's the Will Smith side, where obviously, like, it's probably not easy, like, coming into a new family. Some of you guys grew up in this church. Some of you guys are newer. If you're newer, you know how awkward it can be to come into, like, a church family or a physical family, to come into a new environment where people are trying to show you love, but you're not quite sure on how to respond to that. But there's also the flip side that, if I'm being totally honest, I can probably relate to a little bit more, and that's like the Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv side of things, is like, they didn't have to do that. Like, their life was completely set on what seemed to be their own human effort. Like, they had gone to a good school, they had got a good education, they had worked really hard, they had got good jobs, they had paid their dues, they had moved from a small town out to Bel Air, they had built their own mansion, they had built their own wealth, they had their own good kids that went to their own good schools, that had this nice, cozy life. And just because a distant relative on the other side of the country was going through a hard time doesn't mean that they were obligated to open their home, but they chose to. And if you go through the show, the rest of the show is basically all the chaos that ensues of getting a family dynamic that gets a little bit messy, that opens up our heart to people that need love. And so, but my thing was, like, I don't know how quickly I would have been to open up my door, to open up my heart. And so I just, again, with Souls for Souls, with all of that going on, I just want us in the beginning of the year to kind of reevaluate, like, how did I personally do with reaching souls, with being kind to people, with telling my friends at school about the Capitol, with inviting them out, with being kind to people that come for the first time on Wednesday nights. Like, how did I do? And if you did great, man, like, don't feel ashamed of that. Give yourself a pat on the back. Wear those shoes as a nice trophy. If you didn't, man, like, let's let this be a big priority in 2020. And so I'm going to show another clip, and we're going to kind of talk about it because I think kind of along those same lines of, like, having a fostering heart, there's a lot of language throughout the scripture of family and expanding family. And so in this clip, it's one of the scenes where Will's biological dad kind of comes back into the scene, and there's kind of this crescendo moment. And so let's take a look at this scene. You didn't think Fresh Prince was going to get heavy like that, did you? It's crazy. When I was doing a lot of research about that episode, and the comment section on some of those clips is hilarious, because it's all about, like, I thought I was going to have a good day today. Watch this, nothing but tears. Like, it's hard to just, like, oh, no big deal. Like, if that doesn't hit you in a special way, like, chances are you have a privileged life. Like, you've got it pretty good. I think for a lot of us on all kinds of different levels, it's just something about, like, a father wound that just cuts right through. There's just whether you don't know him, whether he was a letdown, whether he was a workaholic, alcoholic, drug addict, whether he left your parents, left your family, like whatever the scenario is, there's so many different types of wounds, and it's because, like, we were created to be in need of a father. And so I think that's the enemy is He's not super clever, but he's just persistent. He knows that if he can get in the way, if he can change your perception of a heavenly Father and what a father should look like, then he can stop you from ever wanting to pursue him. And I think there's a lot of people in the room that probably have issues with their earthly father, but I think there's also a lot of people in the room that just have a lot of issues with their heavenly Father. As we were kind of praying through this night, my wife Amanda was kind of talking about that she feels like a lot of us have the spirit of an orphan. We might not actually be an orphan, but we have the spirit of an orphan, meaning that you have this mentality that you don't belong anywhere, that you have this mentality that you've somehow been abandoned by God, or that he doesn't see you, or that he doesn't embrace you, or that he doesn't love you. And if you read the Bible all throughout the scriptures, it's all family talk. Like the whole New Testament, it's all family talk. More than any other title that God gives himself is Father. When Jesus taught us how to pray and how we're supposed to address him, he didn't say, oh, heavenly king, or great leader of heaven's armies. He tells us to address him as Father. Actually, the most accurate translation is Abba. We're supposed to call him, which means daddy. Like we're supposed to have this mentality like a little child would reach out to a dad. And that's how we're supposed to approach God. And he says that we've been adopted into his family. And I like that language because the reality is a lot of us weren't born perfect or good, solid Christians. That we had to be adopted into the family. That there was a time where we were outside of that family, but he embraced us as his own children. That we were adopted into the family of Christ. And if you've never heard anyone say that to you, like God loves you, he cares for you, like he is desperately crying out, like he set up your entire life so that you could be here in this moment to hear a guy on stage say that God is crazy about you, that he loves you, that he would do anything for you, that he would even send his only son, Jesus, to die on a cross for you. He's crazy about you, and you need to understand that all you have to do is accept that. There's nothing you can do to earn that. What's been done is done. You didn't have a say, like we were talking about, like the 10%. Jesus already died on the cross. There's nothing you can do to control that, and there's nothing you can do to pay him back, but your response to that needs to just be accept that love and his grace and that care for you. And so you're going to have an opportunity to do that. So even just now, I want you to ponder that thought, like, have I accepted the love of a heavenly Father tonight? And you're going to get a chance to do that. For a lot of us, like I said, there's earthly father wounds. Like there's breakdowns. Like we feel like we're angry at the world because we didn't have a good dad, or like maybe everyone around you thinks you have a great dad, but he's just working a billion hours and isn't there to actually father you. You know, or maybe we watched a movie recently that one of the little kids said to the dad, like, "You're a good father. You're just not a very good dad." You know, meaning like maybe it was just all like rules and regulations and restrictions, but there's no like intimacy, there's no relationship, there's no care. You have basically two choices in that. You can either be a victim by that, and you can lash out in a billion unhealthy ways. Here's what I've realized is there are actually no shortages of father figures in this house. In the world, tons of it's a famine, it's a crisis, it is a worldwide epidemic. We are living in the most fatherless culture that wasn't caused by war. Like, that's a huge deal. But in this place, there is no shortage of godly men who would love nothing more than to pour into you on what it looks like to be a son, to be a daughter, to care for you. Again, we can't be your father, but we can unashamedly be a father to you. Meaning this, and here's your role in that. Here's how you accept that portion of it, is you just got to ask questions. Like, you just got to take the first step. Like, you just have to ask very simple, basic questions, even if it's just, I need help. Like, just 3 words, I need help. And we'll take it from there the best we can. I know that my mentors, I didn't get a billion hours with them, but I made the most of the opportunities that I did have with them. It was my mentor father figures that were there when I asked questions about Amanda. Like, do you think she could be the one? About like career opportunities. Like, do you think this is a good decision? About like major decisions and major turns in the road. I don't have a heavenly or earthly father to go to, and so I have other father figures that I go to when I need someone to be a father in my life. And so if you just need to go to your male small group leader tonight and just say, like, man, what he was talking about tonight, like, I need that. If you want to start calling them Uncle Phil, you do you. Like, whatever you got to do to, like, you know, keep it normal, you got to do that. But, like, man, don't play that victim card because it's just not super valid in this place. Like there are plenty of guys that are here week in and week out to care for you. And so I want to show one more clip on kind of how to respond to our environments. I think this is going to speak a lot to some of our Christmas breaks, how to get into this new year, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. So check out this last clip. I think there's a lot of us that have probably made a lot of bad choices. I think there's probably a lot of us that made a lot of bad choices over Christmas break when there's not as much, homework and there's not the tests and there's maybe not as many eyes on us. What I love about Uncle Phil, I love Uncle Phil for a lot of reasons, but what I love about that particular scene is he held him accountable. That was a coaching moment. He was upset for sure. There's going to be consequences for sure, but if you notice what he did, he made him make things right as soon as possible. And I promise you, that's what our Heavenly Father wants to do. He wants to bring the sin to light. He wants us to confess that. He wants us to apologize to people that we need to apologize to. If you notice, the breaking point in that was not so much that Will had done something stupid, because if you watch the show, like, if Will doesn't do dumb things, there's no Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like, that's the show. It's him making dumb mistakes and making things right. But what broke him in that scene was that his sin now cost other people. And so a question I want to ask you guys is, like, maybe you're sitting here and you're like, dude, I am not responding to this. Like, I've messed up with the same thing too many times. But maybe the question to ask yourself is like, are those choices starting to affect other people? Are they hurting your siblings? Are they hurting your parents? Is it affecting, your job that you have or don't have? Is it affecting your schoolwork? Part of my broken story is that I went through rehab for a season, and I didn't think I was an addict. On day one, they said if it looks like a duck and has feathers like a duck and quacks like a duck and waddles like a duck, it's probably a duck. Okay, and one of the indicators is your sin, is your poor choices starting to affect other people? That's a sign of an addiction, not just an isolated bad choice. When it's time and time and time again, and you've apologized over and over and over, and now it's starting to have emotional collateral damage on the people that you care about. I'm begging you, man, step back from that ledge, because you are on the verge of a turning point. There's a tipping point to sin where God tries to reel you in, get you back. But there's a certain point where he loves you enough to go and live the life that you're trying so hard to live. And he loves you enough to let you hit rock bottom on your own. I'm telling you, rock bottom in the arms of God is a lot softer landing. I promise you. I make mistakes just like everyone else, and I'm grateful that God is kind enough to bring those to light as quickly as possible. And so you have a choice. You can either hide it like Adam and Eve did in the garden. You can try to pretend like God doesn't see it anyway. Or you can be a man like David, who had no shortage of sin in the Bible. When you read his story, we treat him like a hero. He was basically just error after error after error, but he was considered a man after God's own heart, because when you read the Psalms, which were his journal to God, he would apologize. He would confess his sin. He would say things like, you know my heart better than I know myself, God. You know that I love you, and you know that I keep making mistakes. In the New Testament, you see Paul say things like, the very leader of the church saying, the things that I want to do, I'm not doing those things. And the things that I don't want to do, those are the things that I'm doing all the time. And it's not me, but it's my sin nature. And without Jesus, I'm subject to it. I'm a slave to my sin. And I'm telling you, God wants to break that tonight. Like, forget about resolutions. Like, let's just make sure that we're free people, ready to have everything that God has for us in this year, that we're people that can receive his love, people that can grow from others, that can grow from the family around us, that we don't have to have an orphan spirit, that we can have that fostering spirit. We can have that spirit that allows ourselves to be adopted into God's family. And so I want to pray for a few of us tonight, and then we're going to kind of leave this space to do some things with God, either to accept his love. Maybe you need to just come and find a place to pray and accept his love. Maybe you need to find a small group leader and just ask them to be a father figure, to be a mother figure, to be a big brother, a big sister, to whatever that might look like. And asking them for that help is not a statement about your parents. Like, I want you to hear that. Some of the students in this place that have the best parents also have the mentors that are up close in your life. Guys, you are fully allowed to double dip, to have good parents and to have good mentors in your life. That is completely acceptable. And some of you guys need to confess some sin. You need to make some things right. And I want to encourage you, like, tell someone. If you need some help with some stuff, like, just tell someone. Like, if you need to confess something to your leader, man, don't leave tonight. Like, I don't care if we've heard that story a billion times. Tell us. God's grace is sufficient. His mercy is new every single morning. And so, let me do this. If you wouldn't mind just bowing your head and closing your eyes. I just want to know kind of who I'm praying for. So I know there's people in this place. Maybe you're here for the very first time, and for you tonight was just like New Year. I'm going to get in God's house. I'm going to be more consistent at church. But there's people with a billion different stories. But you're here and you're saying, man, first things first, I need to receive God's love. I want to accept him as my Lord and Savior. I want to give my heart to him completely. Like, if you and God aren't right and you want to be right tonight, just lift up your hand so I know who I'm praying for tonight. Hands all over the place. Doesn't matter if you've been here from day one or it's your first time. Like, you need to make sure things are right between you and God tonight. You can put your hands down. Second group of people I just want to acknowledge is the people that you've got father issues, like you've got father wounds in your life, that you've got things, whether it's the lack of a father or things that a father has done that have hurt you. Just put your hands up just to acknowledge that before God. Absolutely. All over the place. You guys can put your hands down. And the last group of people this isn't necessarily an issue of salvation, but it's an issue of your choices, that you've fallen into some things you maybe for the first time, or some things for over and over and over that you thought you've overcome, but you've fallen into sin and you need to confess that tonight. If that's you, just raise your hand real high. It's okay to raise your hand for all three. That's fine. Thank you guys. You guys can put your hands down. Let me pray for you guys, and if you need to leave, I understand, but if we can, let's just make this a place of prayer. If you want to find a leader, you can do that, but let me pray over us, and then let's spread out, and let's take some time to spend some time